Hi there, my name's Thomas Frank, and my hobbies include fiscal responsibility and also fiscal responsibility, which is why I have built an entire recurring expense tracker in Notion that I'm going to teach you how to build today. Seriously though, it seems like every year I sign up for some recurring annual business expense, forget about it like 9 months later, and then when the beginning of the year wraps around again, I end up getting charged and have to either ask for a refund or eat the cost. Literally, this happened to me last year. I got charged $700 for a stock image service that I wasn't using anymore. But that's now a thing of the past because now I have a beautifully built recurring expense tracker inside of Notion that shows me not only how much I'm going to be charged every month or every year for all the expenses in my business, but also when those charges are coming up. And now with Notion Calendar, I have all those recurring expense charges on my calendar so I can see them before they're going to happen and cancel the expenses that I don't need any longer. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to go from a completely blank page in Notion to building this entire recurring expense tracker for yourself and also getting it connected up to Notion Calendar so you can have the exact same peace of mind. Every single week when you're doing your week planning, you'll be able to look ahead and see what expenses are coming up. Now, I did build this primarily for business owners, but if you want to use this for personal budgeting, you want to put like Spotify and Netflix and other recurring personal expenses into it, you can do that as well. The structure will work exactly the same. So before we get into building this, I do want to let you know that as always, your boy has you covered. There is a free Notion template in the description down below if you just want to copy this into your own workspace and use it. But if you want to build your Notion skills, improve your mastery, and figure out how to build this for yourself, let's go ahead and get started with this completely blank page in a free Notion workspace. Like most of my tutorials, this does not require a paid Notion plan. And with that, let's start building this. So on this brand new blank Notion page, I'm going to go up to the three-dot menu. And I'm going to make this a full width page. We want to make a nice full width expense tracker. And I've probably showed B-roll of this in the intro. Tony's probably got that in there, but I'm just going to bring up this little demo here to show you kind of what we're building here. So we have an active expenses area where we can see all of our active expenses. And in this view, they are sorted by their renewal date. So I can see the next ones that are coming up, and I can see what their approximate monthly cost is. Now, if I go into this, we can actually see this is a formula, and that is because I want to see annually billed expenses basically broken down by their monthly outlay, just so I can do better budgeting for my business. We also have some other views here, alphabetical cost view, which is sorted by cost in descending order. We have a calendar view here. We have a category view here, which is pretty sweet. And then we can also go down to this cancellations area and we can see which expenses that we've canceled. And we can also see which expenses we've marked as maybe cancel, just so when we're doing our budgeting, we can go through here and be like, do I actually want that? Maybe not. Finally, over in Notion Calendar, I can see in green all of my upcoming expenses. So this is my actual Notion Calendar. I can see Ayubenda is going to renew today. Next insurance is Thursday. I've got a whole bunch on Saturday. And if I go over to month view with M, I can see lots and lots. And then if I want to see a specific one in Notion, I can open it just like that. And we can see which card I'm using for this expense, what category it is, who the owner is. If we had a reason, we could put that used by, which would be great if you have a team. Maybe you have specific people in like your dev department or marketing department who are using an expense. You can go ask them, hey, do we still need this? We do a lot of that in my company. So this is what we're building. It's one of the most useful Notion templates that I've built for myself. So let's get started with that fun little build process. I've got my full width page here, and I'm going to call this expense tracker. And then, like with many of my builds, we're going to start with a internal page that I'll call databases. So /page right here, we'll call this databases. I'm going to give this a nice little icon. Notion's custom icon set has something I think is called disk. Nope, let's try data. There we go. What is this? Stacked disks. There we go. And then I'm going to make this, actually this doesn't need to be full width because it's just going to hold a database. So I'm going to do /database, and I think I'll go with the full page one here just so it's going to be easier to see what we're building. And I'm going to call this expenses. So this is what's going to be called our underlying database. And if we go into our expense tracker demo, you can see exactly why we want an underlying database. So here we have two different views. And in fact, we have 5 different views of this database in this linked database block. And then we have 2 down here. So in effect, it's actually 7 different views, but these are all filtered and sorted views of the same underlying database, which is in this databases page down here. And as you can see, we just have one database. I have given it a calendar view that will become relevant later on in the tutorial for Notion calendar purposes, but this is kind of what runs everything in the template. And then we're just sort of looking at different views of that underlying database over here. So over in our brand new expenses database, we have a pretty much blank table view here. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this default tags property because it is not actually something that we need. And then to prime ourselves for putting in the properties that we do need, let's go ahead and go back to our demo and just open up any of these pages. That way we can see all of the different properties here. And as you can see, none of them have been hidden, so I don't need to show any hidden properties here. And we can kind of get a look at all the properties we're going to add. So we have a monthly cost and a renewal date. And you'll notice in this demo, and also in the template version below, I've actually utilized Notion's brand new property descriptions feature to add little descriptions to explain what each of these properties actually does. I'm not going to type those in this tutorial because that would take a whole bunch of time, but you can check these out in the template below if you are curious, or in the demo, I'll link that as well. So you have a monthly cost and a renewal date. These are actually both formula properties. This is a pretty simple formula. I will actually type it out. And this is a much more complex formula that I will put in the description below and just copy and paste today. We've got a category. We have a link to the ideally dashboard for the expense. So if we want to cancel it or make changes, we can just click and go directly to that dashboard. We've got a notes area just in case we have any notes about why we're doing this, why we have this expense, what are we doing in this universe, what is life about. We can put any of that right there. Then we have an owner for the expense and a used by category, which is able to hold multiple people just like that. Maybe you've got a team who's using Cloudflare. We have a payment source. If you have multiple business cards or you pay certain expenses out of a business bank account, you might want to use that. We have our recurrence interval. We have a status, which can be active, maybe cancel or canceled. We have a charge date. This is going to be the first date you were charged for this expense, and we are going to use that in our formula for determining the upcoming renewal date. And then we have the actual cost. So if this was yearly, we put 150 per year. If this was monthly, which in the case of Cloudflare, unfortunately it is for us, we put 150, and then we would basically set the recurrence date. And then if we do choose to cancel it, we can set a cancellation date as well. So let's start building this. And we're going to start with a number type property. And I will give a suggestion for Notion. These I don't necessarily always need up here. Maybe I'm too much of a power user for these, but I wish that I could turn these off. Anyway, I'm going to choose a number type property. I'm going to call this cost. And this is going to be our raw cost. So whatever is the actual number that hits our credit card or bank account each time the renewal happens, that is what we want to use here. I'm going to give it a nice little icon. Let's find a money icon. That one looks pretty good. And then for number format, because this is a cost property, I'm going to go with US dollar. Next, I'm going to make a date type property. So let's find a date here. And this one I'm going to call charge date. So again, this is going to be the date at which we were actually charged for the expense. And let's maybe get an example expense in here just so we can see how things shake out as we're building things. So let's call this Tom's Cool SaaS that you're paying for. And let's say it's $5. You started paying for it today. And now we need our recurrence interval. So we're just going to call this recurrence. That's going to be a select type property. And basically this is going to allow us to select between monthly and yearly for our expense recurrence. Now I could add my properties directly here, but for whatever reason, I just enjoy doing it directly in the property itself. So we're going to go with monthly, and then we'll add yearly as well. And I don't love that these colors are very similar. So I'm going to go and make yearly green. That looks a little bit better. In fact, monthly, I think, feels blue to me. What's that term when you like feel colors for numbers in specific terms? Let me know in the comments below. I can't remember it, but I have that. So I'm going to set this as monthly, $5 per month for Tom's Cool SaaS. Seems pretty reasonable. Why would you ever cancel that? But in case you wanted to, this will help you. So the next property we're going to add here is a payment source property, and I will make that a select as well. So select, we're going to call this payment source. And again, this is just useful if you have multiple sources for paying your expenses in your business. So for example, Chase business card might be one for me. I've got another Carrot credit card. And then we could also add in a business bank account or maybe business checking. So that way we know where to go to look at statements just in case we want to see if something was charged or when it was charged or otherwise get information about the expense. So we'll close that out. We'll set this to Chase business card. That seems pretty good. And then as I build this out, because I'm so zoomed in, I'm going to have properties that are going to be going way off the screen here. So I'm going to right click the name property and I'm going to freeze up to the column. That way I can actually scroll, and I don't have enough properties to do it yet, but you'll see just a second why I did that. Let's add one more property here called status. And I think this one we will just name status, but here's a little trick that I like to use. Status properties have these 3 built-in categories: to do, in progress, and done. And that's because Notion inherently designed them for kind of like task or project management. However, status type properties are also the only property that is like a select or a multi-select that has a default value that's always going to come in. If you want a default value for a select type property, you actually have to use a filter to sort of force it in there. So one thing I would love for Notion to do is basically give us this feature in selects, let us set default properties at a property level. But until then, I like to just drag the property options out of these categories, just keep them in progress. That sort of denotes that I'm not really using this for a true, like, getting things done sort of status property. I'm using it for another type of status. In this case, what is the status of this expense? Is it active? Is it canceled? Or are we thinking about canceling it? Well, these statuses should represent those different states of being for those expenses. So let's name this one active. And active feels green, I think. Let's call this one maybe cancel. And I don't know, yellow is kind of like a maybe wishy-washy, I don't know yet, color. And then we'll call this one canceled. And I think even people without the sort of color to term feeling thing that my brain has can see that canceled should be red, I think. Red equals dead redemption. Okay, so now we have our status property. And maybe you can see now, nope, if I drag this way out, I think you'll be able to see it. Because I froze that property, now I can hold shift and scroll. And Tom's Cool SaaS, the name property of this database, stays stuck over on the left. Really nice feature that Notion released fairly recently. I think I've already talked about it in a video, but it's one of those new features that I use all the time now. Let's make sure that our longest status option isn't going to get truncated. There we go. But we'll set this back to active because why would you cancel Tom's Cool SaaS? Okay, some more properties we're going to add in. First and foremost, let's get ourselves a multi-select property, and this is going to be our category property. So if you are running a big old business, then you might have multiple different categories or departments in your business. You might have dev, you might have marketing, you might have admin, you might have janitorial, you might have, I don't know, saving the world department. I don't know what your business does. So we want to be able to categorize our expenses so we can see how much money in our business is going towards each category in that business. So I'm going to make a multi-select category for that, and then we'll give ourselves some categories. Dev might be one, marketing might be one. I like to have a website as a separate category from marketing and dev because I have like hosting and Cloudflare and all sorts of other services we pay for, cookie solutions, all kinds of weird stuff, and maybe even content marketing. So content in our business is seen as a little bit separate from like straight up marketing expenses. If I were to have like an ad campaign on Facebook or something, I would want to see that as separate from, say, stock footage that we're buying for YouTube videos that we're making, like, I don't know, something that could go on my face right now if Tony has time for a joke edit. Okay. So we've got our category there. Let's now add a couple of person properties. I'm going to find person right there. And this one I'm going to call owner. So this is the person who is basically in charge of this expense. And they would be the person the buck stops with for figuring out, should we keep it active? Should we cancel it? What should we do? So because of that, I'm actually going to set the limit property to one person on this expense. And then here I'll just say set myself. I'll be the owner of that expense. And then we'll set another person property that we'll call used by. So a good example for this property type in my company is an app called Text Expander. I personally don't use it. I like Raycast Pro instead, but basically my entire customer support team uses the team version of Text Expander to define and share text snippets, which are basically just snippets for commonly asked customer questions or links that they don't want to type out every single time. So they can put in like a little keyword and it just expands the entire, maybe even multiple set of paragraphs to answer commonly asked questions. So they all pay for that. And for that reason, they would all be in the used by area. So this is a demo workspace, but let's just say that Tony, Alex, and Martin are all on my customer support team. Let's say even I use Tom's Cool SaaS in this case. We can now see all of these people are using this tool. If I was considering canceling it, I might want to go ask every single one of them, hey, would it be cool if we canceled this? Is there a better option we can use? What can we do here? Okay, a few more properties we're going to add before we get into the formula fun. One of them is going to be a URL property, and we're just going to call this link. And again, you would probably want to link directly to the backend dashboard, like the billing area for each tool. That way, if you want to cancel it, you can just click right in Notion, hit that cancel button, or I don't know, get on a long call where they try to keep you around. Who knows what it is? but you'll have quick access to that link there. You can also show the full URL, but Notion has a pretty new feature that actually truncates URLs. I like that quite a bit, so I'm going to leave show full URL off there. And then I'm going to add a text property, good old text property. We're going to call this notes. If you have notes about the expense, like, hey, this is a really cool expense, never cancel it. It's called Tom's Cool SaaS. Why would you do that? You could write that right there. In fact, I will. Perfect. Though if you did want to cancel it, one other date property you might want to add here would be called cancellation date. And this will basically just give you a record of when you canceled an expense, which might be helpful in the future when you're asking yourself, hey, why did we cancel that? Should we add it back into our slew of tools? That kind of thing. Okay, so now the formula fun begins, because at this point we have all of our manual entry properties made in this database, but now we want to get the two most important properties that make this entire Notion template actually useful. And those properties are monthly cost and, most importantly, renewal date. So monthly cost, again, is going to break annual expenses down into their monthly cost, just to basically show you effectively how much they're costing you per month. And then renewal date is actually going to show you when the next renewal of an expense relative to today is. So for monthly cost, we can actually just type this formula out. It's very easy. So I'm actually going to use this as a little mini tutorial for Notion formulas. If you are not used to them, you're not super practiced with them. So for that, let's go ahead and make ourselves a formula type property. We're going to call this monthly cost. I'm going to go ahead and find a money related icon for it. I think coins will work perfectly well there. And then I'm going to drag this all the way over here. And in fact, instead of dragging it, I'm going to go to my property settings and actually drag it from here all the way to the top because it's a little bit easier. And actually, I think I want name there first. That's a little better. Okay, so in here, basically we just need to check if our recurrence property is set to yearly. And if it is, we're going to divide our cost by 12. So we can do that with an if statement. So we'll go if, shift enter to get a new line. Recurrence double equals for the equals comparison operator, monthly, actually we'll do yearly, comma, and then we'll do the basically the if condition. So if this is true, we'll do the first line here, or I guess the second. We'll take cost and divide it by 12. Otherwise, we'll just have cost. Perfect. So now that this formula property is outputting a number, we can actually edit that property and we can change the number format to US dollar or Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, Singapore dollar, euro, whatever currency you want. But I'm going to use good old US dollar, which buys me lots of buckshot and fishing lures. And now I can see it's $5 here. But let's say I set this cost to $50, but it's actually an annual. Now it's $4.17 per month. Look at that. You're getting a nice little annual discount on Tom's Cool SaaS. Okay, so now that we have our monthly cost formula, the other formula we're going to add is our recurrence date formula. So once again, formula property, call this one recurrence date, find ourselves a calendar icon. And once again, I think I'm going to go over to my property settings and drag that up near the top, possibly even before monthly cost. Cool. So for this formula, if we go over to the demo, you can see that the formula is actually quite complex to the point where I'm not even going to try to explain what the code does here. But essentially, the logic behind this formula is we're taking both the charge date and the current date of the month, as well as our recurrence interval, monthly or yearly, and we're using that to essentially calculate the next upcoming recurrence date. And I've added a little bit of extra logic in here to include today's date. So if today is the day it's going to be charged, it will list today. That way, if you wake up and you have an expense on your calendar that would be charged today, it's actually on your calendar today, not a month from now or a year from now on that day. So for now, we're just going to copy all of this code here. I'm going to put this in the description down below in a Notion page link so you can copy it yourself. And we're going to paste it in recurrence date. And look at that, it works perfectly. So February 6th, 2024 is actually today, but if my charge date was actually yesterday, you can see now that the recurrence date is February 5th, 2025. And if I were to set this to monthly, now we can see it's March 5th, 2024. Go ahead and adjust this a little bit. And before we go on to making this nice little dashboard here with our active expenses and our cancellations, I think I'm going to talk about how you can actually hook this up to Notion Calendar, because that might be the most useful part of this entire build, is hooking this to Notion Calendar so you can actually see your upcoming renewals on your calendar and catch the ones you want to cancel instead of getting charged again. So to do that, As I've talked about in my Notion calendar videos already, you actually have to add a calendar view directly to the source database you're working with, not to a linked database like this. So this is a linked database block. I can open it in the calendar, but I do need to have a calendar view specifically on the source database. So because we're already on the source database, I'm gonna go ahead and add myself a view right here, choose calendar just like that. And then down here, this is important. I wanna show calendar by the recurrence date. That way, I'm actually going to see the date at which the expense is going to renew, which in the case of Tom's Cool SaaS is the 5th of March. So now if we go over to Notion Calendar, I'll be able to actually add this as a new database inside my Notion calendar. So I'm gonna go ahead and set myself back to week view here, head on down to my little Notion connection area down at the bottom. And I think I actually need to manage my connections because I'm building this in a video demo space workspace. So I actually need to connect to this workspace. So I guess this also functions as a little bit of a functional tutorial for Notion Calendar. So I think if I go to any of these Notion workspaces here and hit this little 3-dot button, I can go to Manage Workspace, and now I get into Settings, Notion, and I can connect an additional Notion workspace. So I'll hit Connect just like that. This will open up a typical Notion API connection dialog, and I want to make sure that I select my video demo space where I was building this template, hit Allow Access, and now my video demo workspace is connected. So if I get out of this little dialog here, I should see it down here. And then if I go to the 3-dot menu and I hit Add Notion Database, I should be able to find expenses right there. And now expenses is added. So let's go ahead and turn these other business expenses and everything else off just for clarity's sake. And now if we go to our month view and we go over to March 5th, there it is. Tom's Cool SaaS is gonna renew on the 5th of March. If I go over to week view, should be a little bit easier to see. And now if it's Sunday the 3rd or Monday the 4th, and I am looking to plan my week, I'll be able to see, hey, Tom's Cool SaaS is renewing. Do I want to keep it? Do I want to cancel it? I get to make that decision instead of getting charged and then retrospectively having to contact Tom and be like, hey, I didn't want it to renew. Can I have a refund, please? Okay, so going back to our Notion area, now that we have our source database and we have our Notion calendar connection, we're gonna finish this up by making this fancy fancy dashboard here with active expenses and cancellations with these nice views here that just basically sort things differently. So I'm gonna first give expenses a nice little icon just for thoroughness' sake. Let's give this a money icon as well. I think this little cash machine slot seems pretty good. And then we're gonna go back to our expense tracker page, give that an icon as well. I think cash is good there too. And I'm gonna enter down a few times to get databases down there where it belongs. Get on down there. In fact, a little bit more. Thank you. And now I'm going to do a little H1. So /1 for a heading 1. We'll call this active expenses. And underneath active expenses, I'll do /table. I don't want a basic table. I want a table view of a database. And I specifically want to bring in my expenses source database as the data source for this view. And I'll actually start from the table view here because we kind of already set it up and organized it, but I'm going to call it recurrence because the first view I want to see in my recurrence tracker is essentially a list of all my recurring expenses organized by the next one that's going to be renewing. If we look over here in the demo, we can see that renewal date, February 6, 2024 is right at the top, captures my attention, and I can make a decision on it. So to do that here, all we need to do is go ahead and sort by the recurrence date in ascending order. So just to demonstrate what that looks like, if we also had, say, Tony's Cool Pizza delivery service, and that was charged on, say, the 24th, and it was a monthly expense, then boom, there it is. Let's say that's $150 a month for pizza every single day. Now we can see that is at the top of our list. So we've got our sort criteria. I'm gonna go ahead and close that up real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and hide this database title. We already have our name property pinned to the side because we just copied the source database's table view. So the only other thing we might wanna do here is because this is an active expenses area, we might wanna add a filter for expenses that are not active. So in the filter, I could either create a simple filter or if you've watched my tutorials before, you know I like advanced filters a little bit better. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna find my status property and I'm gonna say only show me rows in this table view here where status is active or maybe cancel. And the reason we want maybe cancel in here as well is because if they're maybe, that means we're still paying for them. And watch this, if I go down here to monthly cost, in this calculate area, I can actually do sum just like that. So if something is maybe, we're still paying for it, and we want to see the actual sum of the expenses we're paying for each and every month. And while we're calculating things, we can also come over here to the name property and set that to count all, just so we can see how many expenses we have. And that, my friends, is our recurrence area. If you wanted to, you can go ahead and customize the order or the hide or show status for some of these properties if you don't care about them. I'm not going to worry about that right now. For now, I'm going to go ahead and close this filter right here and start making our other views. As a review here, we also have alphabetical, cost, calendar, and categories. So these two are going to be extremely easy to create. All we need to do is duplicate our recurrence view just like that. Call this one alphabetical. And then the only real difference here is going to be our sort criteria changing from recurrence date to name, again, in ascending order. So that one is done. And then finally, we can duplicate that one as well. Call this one cost. And as you might expect, we're going to change our sort criteria from name in ascending order to monthly cost in descending order. And I'm choosing my monthly cost specifically. That way all my annual expenses don't go above my monthly expenses, some of which might be pretty expensive on a monthly basis. Now, the next one we want to add is going to be a calendar view. And I think we can basically do the exact same thing where we just duplicate this right here. But this time we're going to change the layout type. So after renaming it calendar, I'll go into this layout area and I'm going to set this to calendar. And then again, I want to show my calendar by not the charge date, but the recurrence date. Again, this is a recurrence tracker. I want to see the future recurrences of my expenses, not the first time they were charged. You could also change your view here. If you want to show it by week, you could do that. You could open pages in side peek instead of center peek if you wanted to. You could do all kinds of stuff here. What I will actually do is go back from layout and go into properties, because there might actually be a few properties we want to see here. I think monthly cost would be useful. I think category would be useful. And then maybe even the link. That way, if I wanted to, I could very easily go to that dashboard there. You have all kinds of flexibility here. So basically do whatever you want. And to wrap things up, I'm also going to create a categories view. So to do that, I'm going to go back over to my cost view. Since this is a table layout, I'm going to duplicate that one more time, call this one categories. And I think I'm going to actually set this back to sort by the recurrence date. And again, you can do basically whatever you want here. But to finish this one up, we want to go into our three-dot menu. We're going to go group, and then we're going to group by the category. And by default, the sorting is going to be manual and it's going to hide empty groups. If you wanted it to be alphabetical, you could change that if you wanted. Manual is totally fine for me. In fact, maybe I would prefer to see my website ones first. I could reorder just like that. And now if I get out of here, I can see all of my expenses by their category. Now, I've only got one actual expense here that has a category, but maybe for Tony's cool pizza delivery service, that's actually going to be an office expense. And now we have an office category just like that. And the cool thing about this little category tracker is you can easily collapse the ones you don't want to see right now and just focus on the ones you do. So that's a nice little addition. And I just remembered there was one thing I forgot to do on the source database, which I did do on this calendar view, and that was filtering by our active and maybe cancel statuses. I basically had those come in by default by duplicating our original view. So let's go ahead and go back to our databases page, go into the source expenses database, and then in our calendar view, we'll add that exact same filter criteria. So we're going to find an advanced filter here. We're going to do status is active or maybe cancel. That way, canceled expenses don't actually show up on your Notion calendar, which would be kind of silly. So to wrap this build up, we're going to go back to our expense tracker dashboard here, and beneath active expenses, we're going to create a cancellation dashboard. What did I call this? I just called it cancellations. So once again, H1 for a heading one, call this cancellations. And then we're going to create ourselves yet another table database block. So linked database block specifically. We'll choose our expenses database one more time, bring in that table view just like that. This one we're going to call cancellations. And this is going to be any expenses that we have actively canceled. So let's just say you decided to make me really sad and you canceled Tom's Cool Sass by setting your status to canceled and then setting your cancellation date to today, just to make sure you actually had a record of it. Now, down in cancellations, you're going to see it after we create our filter criteria here. So hiding this database title for aesthetics, I will go over to filter. I'm going to find myself an advanced filter. And just like before, we're going to find that status property. But instead of active and maybe cancel, we're going to set this to canceled. Pretty easy. Also, we're going to set a sort criteria of cancellation date in ascending order, I believe, or we can maybe even do descending if you wanted to see the most recently canceled. That might be more useful. And I think I'm also going to change some of the properties around. If I've canceled an expense here, I probably don't want to see recurrence date. I probably want to see cancellation date. However, before I go ahead and move these properties around, I'm going to duplicate this. And this one I'm going to call maybe cancel. And you can probably see why in maybe cancel, I still want to see the recurrence date because I haven't canceled it yet. So I'm also going to go ahead and set a calculation value on here. I think we're going to do sum and we'll do count all here. That way, if we had, say, a lot of maybe cancels, maybe we're going through a round of budget cuts and we want to go through and mark a lot of different expenses as maybes, we could see how much total money per month we're going to end up saving if we do cancel all of those maybes. To finish up this view, I'm going to go into filter and I'm going to go ahead and change this from status is canceled to status is just maybe cancel. And then we will go with recurrence date once again for our sort criteria here in ascending order. That way we can see the next ones that are going to be coming up on our calendar. And to finish this bad boy off, we're going to go do some property rearranging here by going to the 3-dot menu right there, head into properties, and then I think I'll just move this recurrence date all the way to the bottom. It's not that important. Cancellation date is the start of the show here because we actually want to see when we canceled things. So there you have it, a full expense tracker for Notion. You've got your active area, you have your cancellations. Maybe to make things nice and aesthetic, we could do 3 dashes to create a line down here. And if you wanted to, you could do 2C to create 2 columns, put your databases over here, and then, I don't know, maybe put a little bit of a aspirational quote in the bottom if you wanted to. Perfect. Nailed it. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move that over here. We have a now more aesthetic looking dashboard. Maybe I'll even set this to gray text so it's a little bit more minimalistic, and you're done. So at this point, you might want to just add this as a link in your sidebar. Every week when you're doing your planning, you could come in here and look it over, see what your total monthly outlays are for your monthly expenses. And also over on Notion Calendar, you can see when those renewals are actually coming up. That's going to give you better ability to plan, to budget for your business, possibly also for your personal expenses, and to make sure you don't get caught by renewals, specifically annual renewals that are easy to forget about. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I have a full and completely free template version of this expense tracker in the description down below. So go ahead and grab that if you want it. If you were just watching this for entertainment value and didn't build it for yourself, you can just duplicate that into your Notion workspace in about a second. It's super duper easy. Also in the description down below, I've got number 1, that page with that formula for a recurrence date. If you want to just copy and paste that, if you are building things. I also have a link to my Notion Tips newsletter and Notion Fundamentals page. If you want to learn Notion, that is a full page, completely free open course that will take you from the absolute basics to becoming a Notion expert. We'll go from pages to links all the way up to databases, formulas, Notion API stuff. Basically everything you want to learn about Notion is on that page and on my website, thomasjfrank.com. And you can sign up to my Notion Tips newsletter if you want to be the first to know about new tutorials and templates that I'm building. If you're looking for something else to watch, right here I have another build guide on how to build a full second brain inside of Notion. Uses Tiago Forte's para methodology for organizing all of the things that come into your digital life. Over here, I have a really cool video about how to take notes with your voice and then using ChatGPT and Whisper, transcribe those notes into actual text that is basically perfect, summarize them, and get them straight into your Notion note-taking system. Check those out. Thank you, as always, for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.